Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my prediction for the upcoming death battle between Lucario and Renamon. In this video, I will cover the characters' backstories, their powers and capabilities, why these characters were paired against each other, and then finally my prediction for who I think is going to win. However, before we get started, I feel the need to explain exactly what the parameters are for both this death battle and this prediction. It has been confirmed by the creators of the show that this match will be without trainers, tamers, or unnaturally learned moves. This means no HMs, TMs, or Mega Evolution for Lucario, and no Digi-modifications or Digivolution for Renamon. And to be perfectly clear, neither of them can evolve on their own. With Pokemon, Mega Evolution in 99% of situations requires the aid of a human trainer, and there is no evidence that Lucario is any exception. Similarly, while all Digimon can Digivolve on their own, this requires them to slowly absorb data over time, and this process can take months, years, or even decades. The only way for Renamon to Digivolve mid-battle is to be granted that ability from an outside source, such as a human. There will be no outside help in this death battle, which means that Digivolution is off the table. And lastly, for this prediction, I will be following the precedent set forth by Death Battle and not looking solely at any particular Lucario or any particular Renamon. Instead, I will be looking at all available information for every iteration of the characters. Because of this, I will not be covering any particular character's background. Instead, I will briefly cover the world they live in and what their species means to those worlds. With all that said, let's begin. First off is Lucario. In this world, there are countless creatures called Pokemon. These monsters come in all shapes and sizes, with each one having their own unique and sometimes absurd powers. Some are little more than fish, and others are literal gods. But the variety we will be looking at today is called Lucario. Evolving from the lesser Riolu, Lucario is a rather rare species of Pokemon. But whenever a Lucario shows up on the scene, it's bound to be a major player in any ongoing events. Known as the Aura Pokemon, Lucario can sense mysterious energy given off by all things called Aura, and this power is unique to the Lucario evolution line. Lucarios are often proud and noble fighters with a keen sense of justice and loyalty. As a steel and fighting type Pokemon, most Lucario hide themselves away deep inside mountains to sharpen their combat skills. That's pretty much the background of the Lucario species. Now let's look at what he can do. The first and most important ability to cover is his Aura Sense. Everything in the world has aura, and Lucario is a master at sensing this aura. This allows Lucario to detect the precise layout and positioning of everything around him for about half a mile. It helps to think of this ability as a sort of sonar. It's also important to point out that Lucario's ability to sense aura is independent of his other senses. This means that even if he loses access to his sight and hearing, his aura sense operates with such high precision that will allow Lucario to continue fighting just as effectively as before. But this power really begins to shine when it comes to detecting his opponents. Lucario can detect a foe even if they are underground or completely invisible. This makes stealth pretty useless against Lucario. In addition, he can tell quite a lot about an opponent just by sensing their aura. He can tell what their emotional state is, what species they are, and he can even predict their movements. On top of that, by detecting their aura, Lucario can even read some of their thoughts. Now, it's important for me to stop right here and clarify exactly what the limitations are on this pseudo-mind reading. Lucario is not a psychic-type Pokemon. He cannot read minds, he can only read aura. And while this allows him to perform actions that are very similar to psychic powers, they are not the same and have very clear differences. For example, while Lucario has demonstrated the ability to speak with allies via telepathy, he does this by projecting his thoughts out through his aura, and there is no evidence that this power can be used for anything other than direct communication. Similarly, while Lucario can detect some of the basic thoughts of his foes, such as what attack they are about to use, that is all he can read. After digging into some of the Pokemon mangas, I found a plethora of extra examples of thought reading through aura, and it painted a very clear picture of what the limitations are on this ability. To give you an example, let's say Lucario is facing a foe who's about to use the Razor Leaf attack as part of some grand strategy. Lucario would be able to detect that they are about to use Razor Leaf, and he could act accordingly, but he would not be able to detect anything about the grand strategy behind that attack. In short, while Lucario can tell what his opponent is about to do, he cannot tell why. Those types of thoughts are simply too complex to be conveyed through aura. With that clarification out of the way, let us continue. Lucario doesn't just use aura for detecting things, he can also channel aura for a variety of offensive and defensive techniques. The most versatile and iconic of his offensive techniques is his Aura Sphere. This allows Lucario to form a destructive ball of aura energy that he then launches at his opponent. This can hit with enough force to shatter a stone bridge nearly 10 feet thick. In addition, there are a few variations on this technique. Rather than firing one large aura sphere, Lucario can instead fire dozens of tiny aura spheres. And he can even fire a straight-up laser beam of aura energy. Aura Sphere is so powerful that it was capable of matching and even overpowering a Hyper Beam from Regirock and Registeel, both of whom are legendary Pokemon. It's also worth noting that Aura Sphere is one of the few Pokemon attacks that is specifically stated to be incapable of missing. This means that Aura Sphere will ceaselessly home in on its target, and this will almost always force the opponent to just take the hit. On top of that, Lucario has a technique called Foresight. Not only does this move dispel illusions, reveal invisible enemies, and allow him to strike normally intangible foes such as ghosts, but it also lets Lucario predict where his opponent is going to be. This allows Lucario to strike a foe even if they are highly evasive. Combined with his Aura Sense, this makes dodging Lucario's attacks practically impossible. Lucario's other iconic offensive attack is Bone Rush. Through this, Lucario forms a bone staff out of aura energy which he then strikes with at high speeds and with quite a bit of power. One swing of this staff was enough to send Team Rocket blasting off again. Doing some research, I found that other folk on the interwebs have done math to calculate what it takes to do this to Team Rocket. Their math wasn't perfect, but after improving upon it and adjusting for the context of Lucario's feat, I found that he would have had to strike Team Rocket with over 27 million joules of energy. That's comparable to getting hit with a tank shell. The Bone Rush technique isn't just powerful, it's also quite versatile. Lucario can form several bones at once of varying lengths in order to mix up his fighting style, and he can even spawn and throw a barrage of bones in rapid succession as a form of projectile attack. Bone Rush also has a defensive application. By spinning the staff, Lucario can form a protective barrier that blocks projectiles. One of Lucario's lesser-known aura attacks is Dark Pulse, in which Lucario releases a wave of dark aura in all directions, dealing high damage and having a 20% chance of causing a foe to flinch. But really, Aura's defensive potential is arguably its most valuable asset. With it, Lucario can create energy barriers that can withstand ridiculous amounts of abuse. Most notably, there was one incident in which some criminals sought to blow up Iron Island, where Lucario and his trainer happened to reside. Not only would the explosion have annihilated Iron Island, but it is stated that the blast zone would have reached several miles beyond the diameter of the island. This blast is almost identical in description to a real-life explosion, specifically the first ever US hydrogen bomb test. This detonation also annihilated an island and also had a blast zone of several miles, and this explosion released 10.4 megatons of energy. Thankfully, Iron Island was saved by Lucario and his trainer using their combined auras to create an energy barrier that could contain and relocate the explosion. Now, Lucario did have help from his trainer Riley, but it was never stated or implied that Lucario's aura was any stronger or weaker than Riley's. Plus, Riley was injured at the time, so it's more than fair to give Lucario half the credit. But even if we super lowball this and say that Lucario only provided 10% of the aura necessary, that would still mean he can make energy barriers capable of withstanding 1.04 megatons, over 69 times the power of the nuclear bomb that decimated Hiroshima. But aura isn't all that Lucario has going for him. He is also very physically strong. He has beaten into submission Pokemon who have bodies literally made of metal, and he was even able to beat down a Machoke, who are officially stated to have bodies stronger than steel. His most impressive strength feat that I was able to calculate was when he stopped a Graveler mid-rollout with one hand. It is officially stated that Gravelers can smash through boulders and even trees when rolling. Death Battle has established that an average-sized tree takes about 70,000 pounds of force to break through, which means that in order for Lucario to stop this Graveler, he would have to be exerting over 35 tons of pressure with just one hand. If he were using both hands, then his maximum strength could, hypothetically, be as high as 70 tons. On top of all that, Lucario has a number of means of enhancing his physical strength. The most impressive of these is Sword Stance. This technique increases his striking power by 100% each time it's used, and at maximum, it can increase his striking power all the way up to 400% base. In other words, if he uses Sword Stance once, his physical strikes will deal double damage. If he uses Sword Stance again, his physical strikes will deal triple damage. And if he uses it one last time, his physical attacks will deal quadruple their base damage. It cannot be boosted any more than that. In addition, he also has another technique called Nasty Plot, which works the exact same way as Sword Stance, but it instead boosts the damage of his special attacks, such as Aura Sphere. In terms of speed, Lucario can use techniques such as Quick Attack and Extreme Speed, which allow him to move and attack at speeds too fast for the human eye to track. Lucario's even been able to move so quickly that he appeared and attacked another Aura user before they could detect him. But most impressively, in one instance, Lucario was able to avoid a lightning bolt from Ash Ketchum's Pikachu.
Lucario, dodge him!
Pikachu's lightning has been established to be capable of matching and even surpassing real lightning in both speed and power, which means that for Lucario to avoid this attack he would have to be moving at lightning speed, or 224,000 miles per hour. In addition, Lucario has a passive ability called Steadfast, which causes his speed to be boosted by 50% every time he tanks an attack that causes him to flinch. Similarly to Swords Dance, the maximum amount his speed can be boosted is up to 4 times base speed. In terms of agility, Lucario can leap dozens of feet into the air in a single bound, and he can react fast enough to block dozens of projectiles at once. In terms of durability, Lucario as a whole is really more focused on attack and speed, so his defenses, at least among Pokemon, are only average. That said, he has still tanked a fair number of impressive things. He withstood hits from a Machoke, who are strong enough to lift 80,000-pound garbage trucks, he could endure a lightning bolt from an Electivire, and he could withstand Magmortar's flames, which can burn at 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit or 2,000 degrees Celsius. He was even able to block an already boosted attack from a Mega Lucario, and the resulting impact sent out shockwaves with enough force to knock people off their feet who were over 40 feet away. Also, as a Steel and Fighting type Pokemon, Lucario is immune to poison, and he takes half damage from normal, Steel, Grass, Ice, Dragon, and Dark type attacks. In addition, he only takes 1/4 damage from Rock and Bug type attacks. And through his Calm Mind technique, Lucario can increase his special defense and special attack by 50%, and like the others, this can be used repeatedly to boost his special defense up to 400% base. In terms of intelligence, Lucario is a highly strategic fighter, and always remains cool and collected in combat. By reading his opponent's attacks before they even use them, Lucario is able to begin setting up a counter strategy before the first attack is ever launched. Because of this, Lucario is often thinking many steps ahead of his opponent. Throw in his martial arts skills, and Lucario becomes quite the formidable foe in the strategy department. Now to quickly cover the rest of his techniques that did not fit neatly into my script. The Endure technique lets Lucario survive any attack with 1 HP, but it has to be used right before the attack, and repeated uses risks it failing. If hit with a physical attack, Lucario can use the counter technique to retaliate with his own attack that will deal double the damage of the attack he was just hit with. Lucario can also use the Feint attack, which allows Lucario to strike an enemy Pokemon even if they are using the Protect or Detect techniques. Those moves grant the user the ability to block or dodge almost any attack. So basically, this is just another reason to throw on the pile for why it is ridiculously difficult to avoid getting hit by Lucario. Next is the Force Palm technique, which releases a shockwave of energy from Lucario's hand that deals somewhat mediocre damage, but it has a 30% chance of paralyzing foes. This can also be fired as a ranged projectile. Lucario can also use the Copycat technique, which lets him replicate the move his opponent just used. He can only use the copied move once, and he has to use it immediately after the opponent just used it, but this is still a useful move. And an arguably better version of this technique that Lucario also has is called Me First. This allows Lucario to copy and then use the move his opponent is about to use. And if the copied move is an attack, then Lucario's version will be 50% stronger than the original. To use an example, say that Lucario is fighting a Bulbasaur, and Bulbasaur is about to use the Razor Leaf attack. By using Me First, Lucario will launch his own Razor Leaf before Bulbasaur can even attack, and Lucario's Razor Leaf will be 50% stronger than Bulbasaur's. Lucario can also release a horrible screech with the Screech or Metal Sound techniques, which reduce the defense or special defense respectively of any foes listening. If used repeatedly, these moves can reduce a foe's defense or special defense by, at most, 75%. Next up is Lucario's Reversal technique. This should be familiar to those who played Lucario in Super Smash Bros. Reversal is a fighting type attack that deals damage based off of Lucario's missing health. In other words, the more harm Lucario comes to, the more damage Reversal will deal. At its most impressive, Reversal is more powerful than any other naturally learned single-shot Pokemon attack that isn't some form of self-destruct. This makes it more powerful than the likes of Hydro Cannon, Flash Burn, and Hyper Beam. Speaking of self-destruct moves, next is what is easily Lucario's most risky technique, called Final Gambit. This attack knocks the user unconscious in order to deal the user's entire health bar and damage to the opponent. Trouble is, Lucario doesn't really have much of a health pool even at max level, so this technique isn't that useful. But he has it if he wants to use it. The Laser Focus technique consists of Lucario focusing intently on his next attack so as to ensure that it critically strikes, dealing double damage in the process. Lucario can also use the aforementioned Detect technique, which allows Lucario to dodge any oncoming attack. although using this technique repeatedly will eventually cause it to fail. Next is the Metal Claw technique, in which Lucario sprouts some metal claws, which he then strikes his opponent with. It deals pretty mediocre damage, but it has a 10% chance of boosting Lucario's attack power by 50%. His next technique is called Power Up Punch, which is actually rather similar to Metal Claw. This fighting type attack consists of Lucario coating his fist in energy which he then strikes his opponents with. It can also be fired as a projectile. This attack deals less damage than Metal Claw, making it one of the weaker Pokemon attacks, but it makes up for it by being guaranteed to boost Lucario's attack power by 50% every time he uses it. Next is an interesting variant on Lucario's energy barrier called Quick Guard. This technique forms a barrier extra quickly at the cost of it not being as strong as his normal barriers. In other words, Quick Guard is specifically useful for blocking high-speed, low-damage attacks such as Quick Attack. The Work-Up technique boosts Lucario's attack and special attack by 50%. Next is an attack called Close Combat. This attack deals very high damage and is actually one of the most powerful fighting type attacks. It can even one-shot some Pokemon. The only downside is that using Close Combat lowers Lucario's defense and special defense. His next ability is called Dragon Pulse, in which Lucario fires a beam of draconic energy from his mouth that deals respectable damage. The Focus Energy technique lets Lucario more easily land critical strikes, which, again, deal double damage. And last but certainly not least is Focus Punch. This is actually the single most consistently powerful fighting type attack. It literally has as much power as a Hyper Beam. The only downside is that it takes a very brief moment for Lucario to charge up the energy for this attack, and if he is hit while charging, the attack will be cancelled. Again, it is truly a brief moment that he has to spend charging, but it is a vulnerability. Oh, and Lucario also has a move called Heal Pulse, which heals allies, but it can't be used to heal himself, so it won't really be useful in this death battle. Now to look at Lucario's various notable victories. He beat down an Aggron, whose body is literally made of iron, he took down a Heatran, whose body is literally made of steel, and he took down a Machoke, whose body is stronger than steel. He curb-stomped the ever-living crap out of Ash Ketchum's Pikachu, he took down Dia's Shieldon, Munchlax, and Torterra all at once, and he was even able to use Aura Sphere to harm Darkrai, who is a mythical Pokemon. If you didn't know, mythical Pokemon are a tier above legendary Pokemon, and legendary Pokemon can affect the entire planet. But for all of Lucario's impressiveness, he has his fair share of weaknesses. As a fighting and steel-type Pokemon, he takes double damage from fighting, ground, and fire-type attacks. In addition, certain low-frequency sound waves cause intense pain to steel-type Pokemon. Lucario's aura protects him from this, but if the waves get too powerful, he too can be overwhelmed. Also, his aura is not infallible. Those who are knowledgeable in aura have found ways to hide their presence from Lucario using special techniques or special clothing. But what is certainly his biggest vulnerability is his mediocre defenses. While he does have the means to boost his special defenses, he has no means of boosting his defenses against physical attacks, which can be a problem since Lucario is largely a melee fighter. This can become particularly problematic when he uses moves like Close Combat, which not only puts him in close proximity to his foe, but also reduces Lucario's defenses. And since he has no way to boost his defense, that means anytime Lucario uses Close Combat, his defenses will be permanently reduced for the rest of the fight. And that's everything I know about Lucario. Now for Renamon. On this version of Earth, some scientists back in the 80s accidentally made an entire alternate digital world in which countless creatures called Digimon exist. These monsters come in all shapes and sizes, with each one having their own unique and sometimes absurd powers. Some are little more than house pets, and others are practically gods. But the variety we will be looking at today is called Renamon. Evolving from the lesser Viximon, Renamon is a rather rare species of Digimon, but whenever Renamon shows up on the scene, it is bound to be a major player in any ongoing events. Renamon is very fox-like in appearance, with heavy influences present in her character from the likes of Taoism and nature. Renamon are often proud and noble fighters with a keen sense of justice and loyalty. Renamons tend to have a very direct and frank relationship with humans, and they often tend to grow into highly intelligent and skilled fighters. That's pretty much the background of Renamons. Now let's look at what she can do. The first thing about Renamon you're likely to notice is that she tends to appear and disappear out of thin air. A lot. And you may be wondering how she does this. And that's a very good question. Because they never tell you! In the entirety of the original anime, they never spend a single second explaining how Renamon does the things she does. They somehow found time to talk about Digimon gender, but they couldn't be bothered to explain how Renamon can pop in and out of reality. Thankfully, I was able to figure it out through the use of extra sources such as the games and the official Digimon dictionary, but they did not make it easy for me. Turns out Renamon has several means of appearing and disappearing, and the first of these is through her incredible speed. Speed is what Renamon is all about, and she regularly moves faster than the eye can track while bombarding foes with a barrage of punches and kicks. But there's more. She also has the ability to teleport, which allows her to move around the battlefield with ease. She can even use an interesting variant on this technique in which she swaps positions with her opponent. Now, the final disappearing technique Renamon has that I discovered was in the official Digimon dictionary. Turns out that Renamon can change the texture of her body to match her surroundings, effectively granting her invisibility. This technique is so effective that Renamon can be standing in the middle of a busy crowd and remain completely undetected. But stealth and speed aren't all Renamon has going for her. She is agile enough to leap dozens of feet in a single bound. She is also very strong, to the point that she can obliterate an armored Digimon with a single strike, which is very impressive, as Digimon armor tends to be incredibly strong. She also has the ability to enhance her striking power even further with the Power Paw technique. This coats her hands and feet in blue flames that allow her to strike foes with quite a bit of power. In terms of durability, Renamon as a whole is really more focused on attack and speed, so her defenses, at least among Digimon, are only average. That said, she has still tanked a fair number of impressive things. She has been stabbed, electrocuted, poisoned, and she once even survived a fall off of a skyscraper that was nearly 50 stories tall. That's no small feat. In terms of intelligence, Renamon is a highly strategic fighter and always remains cool and collected in combat. She utilizes her martial arts skills and high speed to outwit and outmaneuver foes, allowing her to take down Digimon far bigger and stronger than herself. Now to quickly cover the rest of her techniques that did not fit neatly into my script. What is easily Renamon's most powerful attack is called Diamond Storm, a wind elemental attack in which Renamon forms a bunch of energy leaves that she then launches at her opponent. That may sound lame, but these sleeves can slice through armored Digimon like butter, and they can then detonate with enough energy to destroy a car. That would require over 4.6 million joules of explosive energy. And Renamon can also create fighting clones of herself that she can send after enemies. Renamon also apparently has the ability to use up all of her energy in order to heal others, but she can't heal herself, so that won't be of much use in this death battle. In terms of her victories, Renamon has demonstrated that she is easily one of the most powerful rookie-level Digimon. Not only can she take down Digimon in her own weight class, but she has also defeated more highly evolved Digimon such as Flybemons and Harpymon. And by working together with the Digimon Tamers, Renamon has helped save both the digital and real worlds on multiple occasions. But for all of Renamon's impressiveness, she has a fair number of weaknesses. Renamon is a Holy type Digimon, which means she takes extra damage from Darkness Elemental attacks. Also, as a Digimon, Renamon is vulnerable to being forced back into a prior evolution should she take too much damage in combat. In addition, all of Renamon's most impressive feats relied upon her having access to higher transformations and abilities. She needs her tamer to reach those, and since she won't have access to her tamer in this death battle, her maximum potential will be much more limited. And that's everything I know about these characters. Before I get to my prediction, here are the reasons these characters were paired against each other. Pokemon versus Digimon. Both are humanoid creatures that have canine-esque features. Both are skilled martial artists. Both are calm, collected, and intelligent. Both can conjure energy projectiles. Both tend to be in partnerships with humans. Both are fan favorites. Both can boost their attack power. Both were based off of mythological creatures. And both have healing abilities that they can't use on themselves. Alright, now for my prediction. I think the winner of this death battle will be Lucario. This is actually a pretty close match, especially when you're just looking at the base stats. In terms of strength, they can both defeat enemies who are stronger than steel, but Lucario has to put in a bit of effort, whereas Renamon can do it in a single strike. Lucario can close the gap a bit with his attack boosting, but then Renamon takes the advantage again when she uses her own attack boosting. In terms of speed, Lucario dodging lightning firmly gives him the edge in base speed, even more so when you consider his ability to boost his speed, but Renamon's nearly instantaneous teleportation lets her hold her own. In terms of durability, Lucario definitely has the edge. Renamon's most impressive durability feat was falling off of a 48-story building, which would result in her impacting with about 153,000 joules. But Lucario could tank a hit from a Graveler mid-rollout, which can obliterate trees. A car can crash into a tree with nearly 2 million joules of energy and do nothing. So blocking this firmly puts Lucario's durability well over 12 times greater than Renamon's. Throw in the fact that Lucario can boost his special defense and the gap widens even further. But, to be clear, while Lucario may be more durable, Renamon is more than powerful enough to destroy him if given the chance. However, once you expand beyond their base stats and look at their arsenals as a whole, it becomes clear that Renamon is not going to get that chance. This is due in large part to Lucario's Aura Sense. This nullifies Renamon's invisibility, lets Lucario know where she is at all times, and, most importantly, lets him predict her every move. This gives Lucario a massive advantage, and his larger, more versatile arsenal give him the means to expand upon that advantage. His energy barriers can tank anything Renamon can throw at him. His Aura Sphere is more versatile, more reliable, and more powerful than Renamon's Diamond Storm. Lucario has far more means of boosting his own stats while reducing hers. Any particularly useful techniques Renamon may have can be copied by Copycat and me first. Lucario's counter technique lets him turn Renamon's power against her, and thanks to Lucario's steadfast and reversal techniques, any damage done to Lucario is only going to make him faster and stronger, whereas harming Renamon is only going to weaken her. So, as a whole, I think Lucario's superior speed, power, versatility, and Aura Sense give him the tools he needs to defeat Renamon. As such, I think there's a solid 80% chance that Lucario is going to win this death battle. As for the ending pun, I'm thinking something like, "Looks like Renamon just got tamed," or "Renamon just met an aura-able end." You see, it's like horrible, but instead, it's aura-able. Ha ha. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. Gotta say, as someone who watched all of Digimon Tamers in prep for this video, I do not recommend it. I mean, if you love Digimon, then knock yourself out, but to the average anime/cartoon watchers out there are literally hundreds of better series to watch. Like, on a scale from -10 to 10, I gave Tamers a 1.25, which is to say that it wasn't bad, it's just not that good. Mostly because the majority of the show is super boring and repetitive. It only really had one fight that I enjoyed. Although, to its credit, it was still better than Voltron. That series had 0 fights that I enjoyed. Holy cow. Never watch Voltron. So bad. Anyway, got a little sidetracked there. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off. Like if you enjoyed the video, comment if you have something to say, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, have a fantastic day.